So we try to connect dots. We try to make sense of this senseless. And there have been a few things happening simultaneously. And again, I think a lot of what's happening with the economy, which is fueled almost entirely by Donald Trump's insanity, is, I mean, it's serious, but it's also cover for a lot of other things that are going on under the radar. So I want to look at it this way. They say that the tariffs and attacking our Fed share are all in the service to making the economy better for the American people. Well, guess what? It's going to make things worse for small businesses. It's going to make things worse for employment, and it's going to make things worse for prices and inflation. They say that, led by psychopaths like Robert Kennedy, that they just want to protect children with autism. Well, they don't. And not only that, but by making things harder for children with autism by lying about the etiology of autism and lying about how well people on the spectrum can function, they're going to make things worse for all of our children. We can go on and on and on and on looking at examples like this. But just let's get really simple here. For example, they've erased the COVID-19 website on whitehouse.gov. So, is that just because that will make things worse for the psycho lefties who quote unquote believe in COVID? Or do you seriously think that by failing to inform the American people about highly contagious communicable diseases, we're helping anybody? And that is the theme that we're seeing time and time again in the Trump regime. They're lying in order to, about what they're doing in order to, in the short term, the medium term, and the long term, make everything worse for all of us. Let's dive in. Look at us go with our new theme. Holy cow, that was awesome. You guys look amazing.
You look great. That was fantastic.
Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of Mary Trump's Nerd Avengers. With me are Brian Caron, White House reporter, best-selling author, host of the podcast Just Ask the Question, now celebrating its 7th year on air this month. Also, Danielle Moody, perfect timing, host of Get Woke here at Mary Trump Media and host of the Danielle Moody Show and co-host of Democracy-ish on her YouTube channel at Danielle Moody _. And, of course, Adam Parkmenko, former DNC National Field Director and Substack writer at thealtmedia.com. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Yeah, it's been a very slow. No. What am I trying to say? Slow news days, weekends. Apparently, we don't get to have those anymore. So let's start here because this is just making a terrible situation worse. And I'm talking about the unforced error of the horrors of the economy, thanks to Donald Trump. Trouble continues. I don't like putting it this way. I was going to say there's no trouble between Donald and the Fed. Donald is creating trouble with the Fed because he's doubling down on his attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, whose job literally it is to keep the markets as stable as possible during times of volatility. And the volatility that Jerome Powell is dealing with right now is entirely created by Donald Trump's insanity. So let's see what Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had to say about Fed independence, which in the not too distant past was an extraordinarily important thing, kind of like the DOJ's independence. This is what she had to say during her press briefing today.
Kevin Hassett has been a key economic advisor to the president in both of his terms. In 2022...
And he still is.
And he still is.
He was just in my office.
Absolutely. In 2022, he said that the independence of the Fed is super important. That's a direct quote. Is that something that the president subscribes to? Does he still believe in the independence of the Federal Reserve?
Well, look, I think the president has made his position on the Fed and on Powell quite clear. The president believes that they have been making moves and taking action in the name of politics rather in the name of what's right for the American economy. The president has the right to express his displeasure with the Fed, and he has the right to say he believes interest rates should be lower.
Okay, well, yes, let's listen to Donald, who's so brilliant when it comes to the economy. I mean, he's brilliant at ruining it, so that's true. Leavitt refused to confirm that Donald will let the Fed have its continued independence, which seems, important to me. And this is a continuing concern to investors who are afraid that Donald's going to overstep and fire Powell and essentially take over the Fed, which, let's be clear, is exactly what he's done to the Department of Justice. The Fed is supposed to be independent from partisan politics. If politics are being injected here, it's Donald doing the injecting. Because as that reporter mentioned, to leave it, Donald's own staff and fellow Republicans have emphasized for years how important the Fed's independence is. And I mean, what's like so ridiculous about all of this, and I mean, obviously it's not just ridiculous, but it's quite serious. But it's ridiculous because none of this would be happening if we had a sane leader in charge who was able to take in the evidence in front of his eyes. We're seeing the concern about the potential takeover of the Fed being reflected in how the stock market performed yesterday. The Dow, S&P, and Nasdaq all fell nearly 2% in the wake of Donald. And again, this is the level of maturity we're dealing with. He publicly called Powell a quote unquote major loser on his failing social media company. And in response to that post, global investors began offloading their US-based stock in fear of that potential Fed takeover. I mean, this is not how any of this is supposed to work. And it is, as I said at the beginning, making a very bad situation because of the tariff insanity infinitely worse, because not only is it roiling the economy further, it is decreasing confidence in what had heretofore been an absolutely sure bet. The American economy, the dollar, and our word, the full faith and credit of the United States of America meant something until now.
I mean, I think that we have to understand that this is not how democracies work, but this is absolutely how autocracies work. This is actually very much out of the playbook. You destroy institutions, you take them over, you ruin the economy. And by the way, I think that it's important to say here that part of what I think that Donald Trump is doing with the manipulation of the markets is, one, he's creating opportunities for the oligarchs to quote unquote buy in the dip, right? Because the only people that are able to buy when the markets are tanking are people that have money, right? And so he is manipulating the markets to the benefit of the oligarchs, who those are the same people that voted for him, that put him in charge, because he's pillaging the government in order to give them the enormous tax breaks that they don't actually need. That's on one hand. The other hand, that I think what looks good for Donald Trump in terms of the destruction of our economy is that a lot of people's 401ks and their pensions are wrapped up in the stock market. And if you destroy those, if you destroy economic stability, then you're going to force people back into the workforce. You're going to force them into situations of desperation. And there is no better people to take advantage of and to take over than a desperate people. So if I don't have long-term retirement and economic stability that I've been working for the last 20, 30, 40 years of my career, if that's destroyed in the matter of 100 days, right, then now now I'm going to take whatever job that I can get. I don't care how I'm going to be treated. I just need to keep a roof over my head. I need to keep food on the table, and I need to do what I can in order to just survive. He is manufacturing chaos and distraught, right, in order to take advantage of a people. And so if you have resources, right, that gives you opportunity. And if you have opportunity, then oligarchs aren't able to take over. If you create the conditions of desperation, it makes you easier to control. So to me, there's a twofold that is happening right now with his market manipulation, which, by the way, is also illegal. But, that only mattered in times when the rule of law mattered. So.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And again, Adam, it's not just these things that are illegal. Just Doge is illegal, or at least unconstitutional. What's happening at the DOJ, taking away funding that's already been allocated by Congress. All of these things. And what worries me with the economy is, what is there to do about it? We have a madman who opens his mouth and says something stupid, ill-advised, threatening, and look what happens to the market. The global economy is roiled, and I think sometimes with Donald, it's because he just cannot admit he's wrong or that he's doing something wrong. I think sometimes in this case, especially if he's continuing, if it doesn't affect him personally, if he continues to be getting rich, it's that he's literally standing there and thinking, wow, look how powerful I am. All I need to do is call Jerome Powell a loser, and look what happens to the stock market. I seriously think that's part of what was going on sometimes. What do we do about that? How do we protect ourselves from that? I think Adam's muted. If we could unmute him, that would be awesome.
I think I got it.
There you go.
The folks in the background were quicker. We hit it at the same time. For the record, I hate going after Danielle because I always feel like I'm in like a PhD level class and I'm reading a book. It's like so authoritative. I struggle with this a lot, having two parents that are retired, and they look at everything that's tied up into what we're discussing, and they see it go down to almost nothing when they were in a really good place. And, we talk about the dignity of work when you've got folks who worked for a university or a civil service their entire career, and they've worked really hard to have what they have and make sure that they can, pay their property taxes and keep their old Sears home. And it's really, it's somewhere in between, it's not affecting Donald Trump, right? Or he wouldn't continue to do this, because it's not like they're doing this once or twice. They're doing it multiple times.
Right.
There's clearly a benefit to a number of people, as we're describing. We talk about oligarchs for years and years in Russia and other places like that, but we have them here. And they're in this administration. And a lot of what's going on when we see people like Marjorie Taylor Greene getting stocks for the first time is it's clearly benefiting them. To answer your question, I don't know. But what I will say is...
Yeah, I'm not saying there's an answer, but I think the fact that there isn't is... Yeah.
A lot of times it feels like there is if someone had the right answer here, hopefully we'd be out of this mess. But it does seem, to go back to Danielle's point 2 weeks ago, that a lot of people have to really be affected and hurt to realize we are as close to each other than many of us may have realized to get out of this mess if there is another election in the future. But this is criminal what's taking place. And when you see stories coming out about, a United Airlines plane where the passengers are asked mid-flight to hold onto the roof to keep it together, you just don't remember these stories coming out under Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Pete Buttigieg. But what they're doing to people who have worked their entire lives just to be able to have their friends over for dinner and put a meal on their tables is a disgrace. And obviously there's a lot of manipulation here that's highly illegal, but who do we have that's going to come and save us?
Yeah. And Brian, that's an awful place to be, but it's not just there because, we see, and, feel free to add to what's going on with the economy, but I wanted to shift gears a little bit. I mean, again, it's related though. We look at what's happening with the Pentagon, and it's in complete disarray because a completely incompetent guy who has no relevant experience and who is a sycophant and is entirely beholden to Donald's agenda, was put in charge of over 2 million people, which is a disgrace. Thank you, Republicans in the Senate, who decided to abdicate yet another constitutional duty that you're supposed to take seriously in the advise and consent role. So first, a quick update on what's happening, and then we'll talk on the other side.
You said on Fox News that the entire Pentagon is working against Secretary Hegseth, but the people who were fired were Hegseth's own guys. So how do you square that, and what do you say to concerns that that's bad management?
They were Pentagon employees who leaked against their boss to news agencies in this room, and it's been clear since day one from this administration that we are not going to tolerate individuals who leak to the mainstream media, particularly when it comes to sensitive information. And the Secretary of Defense is doing a tremendous job, and he is bringing monumental change to the Pentagon. And there's a lot of people in this city who reject monumental change, and I think, frankly, that's why we've seen a smear campaign against the Secretary of Defense since the moment that President Trump announced his nomination before the United States Senate. Let me reiterate, the president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth in the change that he is bringing to the Pentagon, and the results that he's achieved thus far speak for themselves.
Oh, is he standing strongly behind him? That's so
No.
Donald of him. But those are the lies. So we've got a clip with some facts. So let's look at some facts now, and we'll do like a compare and contrast.
President Trump is defending Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth after another possible security breach. Sources tell ABC News Hegseth shared information about upcoming U.S. strikes in Yemen in a second Signal chat, this time with family members. Now a Republican is joining calls for Hegseth to step down.
We have Congressman Dan Bacon. He sits at a senior level of the House Armed Services Committee. He has actually called for Pete Hegseth's ouster in response to this new second Signal chat that featured Pete Hegseth's wife, brother, and a personal lawyer, where he discussed, similar to that text thread with the Atlantic reporter, the March 15th strikes on Yemen, some operational details. And as we've heard from our Martha Raddatz, this is an instance where if a career official in the Defense Department was found to be communicating such operational plans, they would be fired and probably placed under criminal investigation.
Where do you want me to start?
I know it's like
let
an
me
embarrassment
unpack all
of
of this.
riches.
All right, first of all, in the briefing room, she did not address the question. She talked about leakers.
No way.
She did not address the fact, and she lied afterwards. I know several people in the Trump administration who are saying, get rid of this moron. And by the way, there are many people, most like 95%, and I've covered defense for 40 years. There are people in the Defense Department are absolutely aghast, agape, and amazed that this guy isn't already in prison, that he hasn't been charged. This guy is not going to be. The reason why he's there is because if Donald Trump wants to declare a national emergency and martial law, he knows that Hegseth will agree with him. That's the only reason why he's there.
Wait, Brian, I have a quick question for you, though.
Sure.
Are there not other people who would do the same thing who aren't going to get us all killed by, putting us at great national security risk? I mean, there must be people who are competent who would also be totally down with declaring martial law.
Brian, can I throw out an example of someone like that?
Wait a minute, let me answer her question real quick. But to your point, Mary, you know your uncle better than I do. He's a moron, and this guy is a sycophant.
I hadn't considered that before.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
right? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Adam. And then
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to say, in terms of examples, right? Like someone like General Kellogg, but when you look at what they're doing, right, they still cut his legs out from underneath him.
Well, I think he
right
just
now.
likes Hegseth's tattoos. And then to unpack
Central casting.
yes, and then unpack it even further. I want to go back to what you all were talking about real quickly about the economy and what was said about from John Decker's question, from the other question in the White House to the press secretary, PEP secretary, as I call her. Look, he has the right to say those were targeted words, because if you look at today, the stock market, twice before when Caroline Levitt has come out and spoken, and I love Leavitt as a name better than Levitt anyway, but
I always call her Leave It.
because she leaves it out there. So when she's been out there before, the stock market has tanked twice. It was going well. She came out and said something, and it completely tanked. She's been informed and instructed to say certain key words. So the key word she said today was he can think whatever he wants and he can express his opinion. That reassured the markets, and the markets have risen today. All of this is because Donald Trump. That does not take anything away from the fact that Donald Trump wants to do exactly as you all pointed out. But what the key words and the key thing you have to take away from that today, this was all targeted to bring the markets up so he doesn't get the criticism that he's had in the past for tanking the markets. It still covers what his end game is for oligarchs and for rich people to make a boatload of money while screwing the rest of us. And if you missed that point, there was also the point that he's going to go after people who owe on their student loans.
Yep.
And he went after them far harder than he has gone after the people who have actually stolen money from the government, the rich folk. So he doesn't want you to A, have an education, B, he wants you stupid, C, he wants to make sure that you owe forever and you work forever your entire life. And if you don't like that, join the military, because Pete Hegseth's going to put you on the border against the Posse Comitatus Act, by the way, which they haven't invoked or haven't even requested a waiver on. And I remind people, and here's the final word on that. I remind people that in the first administration, when he decided that he wanted military on the border, it was me, John Bennett, and one other reporter who said, how are you going to get around the Posse Comitatus Act? You cannot, and he goes, and this, the Carolyn Levitt at the time representative in that briefing room said, well, is that like a rule or something? I said, no, it was a law, and it was passed by, guess what, Republicans. And the idea is that you can't have the military on our soil doing military things and without it. But it has happened in the past, but you get a waiver from Congress. He doesn't care about the rule of law. This is another example. Everything that you've just unwound so far today is just another example, several examples of Donald Trump not caring about the rule of law, only caring about him ruling by fiat. And it's a disgrace, and it has to end.
Right. But I mean, let's be clear. That's because the Republicans in Congress have given him absolutely no reason to care, because they're just abdicating all of their constitutional authority. So I want to wrap up just to make it clear just how insane this Pentagon stuff is. A former top official at the Pentagon, John Olliott, wrote an op-ed for Politico this week detailing the chaos, utter chaos happening inside the Pentagon, with staffers getting blamed right and left for leaking sensitive information. Rumors are abound that Donald is considering replacing Hegseth. I'm not going to hold my breath necessarily, but if somebody's able to convince Donald that it makes him look bad to keep Hegseth there, then or find somebody who is equally sycophantic. But again, it's worth remembering, despite the incompetence aside, right? Hegseth is endangering Americans. He is undermining our national security, not simply by discussing highly classified information on unsecured chats with people who have no security clearances, including his wife and his brother.
Hey guys,
the guy should be in prison. Okay, so there's that. But also, what people may not understand, because I don't see it being talked about in this context. We've talked about it here, but it's again worth remembering. The more dysfunction there is, the more obviously unconcerned the people who are supposed to be in charge of our national security, and that's not just Pete Hegseth, that includes Tulsi Gabbard, et cetera, right? the less our allies are going to
You're
trust
making it
us.
worse.
Making
That's-
it worse. Why would one of our allies share intelligence with us if they cannot trust that we will handle it appropriately? So what does that mean? Our allies aren't sharing very important intelligence with us about potentially terrorist attacks on our soil, for example. So, you
We're
know,
not gathering it either, Mary, to that point.
no, we especially if it has to do with Russia or any of Russia's allies, who are now apparently our allies. But just to remind everybody again that this is all of a piece and it all comes from the top down. This is what happens when you put in charge somebody who takes responsibility for nothing. You know, the buck stops somewhere else entirely because this is Hegseth who's continuing to blame all of his problems on the leakers. This is what he told Fox.
So, Mr. Secretary, I guess I can conclude this. We know some bizarre situation with Michael Waltz happened with the first time the whole thing with the Signal app came out. You believe this came out, they said it was called Team Huddle, because one of the people who work for you, one of the three who no longer are there, leaked this out as a way to get back at you?
That's right, Brian. When you dismiss people who you believe are leaking classified information, and again, the investigation is ongoing and that will take time, and when the evidence produced, it will go to DOJ, why would it surprise anybody, Brian, if those very same people keep leaking to the very same reporters whatever information they think they can have to try to sabotage the agenda of the president or the secretary? So once a leaker, always a leaker, often a leaker. And so we looked for leakers because we take it very seriously. And we will do the investigation. Right. And if those people are exonerated, fantastic.
Wow, one's always
He's
often.
a leaker. He's a leaker.
Also, this stupid, it burns. But let's move on because it's just unbearable. It's just absolutely unbearable.
Say one thing there? From years of covering the DOJ and the DOD, that guy was a leaker. That guy, even in his news environment, leaked to other members of the press. He's to be as trusted as Steve Buscemi was in The Sopranos. He's a rat. I'm just telling you, he's a rat.
Well, yeah, again, in service to whom? All right. So as we know, another thing the Trump regime's going after is our institutions of higher learning, and that fight keeps ramping up. So let's take a look at MSNBC's coverage on the fight between Harvard and the Trump regime.
Harvard University is now suing the Trump administration over those multi-billion-dollar cuts to research funding for the school. Harvard is calling it in this suit unconstitutional and illegal. Now, this is the latest development in an escalating showdown. The university, Harvard, resisted a list of demands from the Trump administration on things like eliminating its DEI program altogether and mandatory sharing of some admissions and hiring data.
This is the most aggressive and sort of comprehensive pushback that we have seen from one of these universities. So many of them have come under fire from the Trump administration, and their sort of stated aims here have been to root out, to combat anti-Semitism and violence on college campuses like Harvard's. But Harvard's lawsuit now is arguing that this has, and their demands have, been a violation of the school's First Amendment rights.
Okay, so this escalation just shows how far Donald is willing to go to make universities bow down to him, and it doesn't help, of course, Danielle, that he had an assist from universities with massive endowments and huge amounts of power, like Columbia. I'm ashamed to say one of my alma maters. So at least some universities are fighting to maintain autonomy, as we see there, over 150. U.S. universities, university presidents, including those that are targets like Harvard, Princeton, and Brown, sign a letter condemning the action towards higher education. And the letters is clear, which is basically just back off. Quote, "We're open to constructive reform and do not oppose legitimate government oversight. However, we must oppose undue government intrusion in the lives of those who learn, live, and work on our campuses," unquote. But just a segue, because you pointed to this earlier in a different context. Donald's coming for students too, who, if you think about how expensive it is to get higher education in this country, if you think about how devastating the economy is going to be for kids graduating from university, trying to get jobs, et cetera, or trying to live independently, the education department will resume collections on defaulted federal student loans, in order to collect, they're going to institute things like wage garnishment and tax refund withholding. Here's a report from CBS WTKR News 3 in Norfolk, Virginia.
This week, the Department of Education announced it's restarting the collection of federal student loans that are in default. That change happening on May 5th in just a couple of weeks, ending a roughly 5-year-long pandemic-era pause. This could impact so many people. Student loans go into default after 270 days of non-payment. So the department now is urging borrowers who are in default to start making a monthly payment, enroll in an income repayment plan, or sign up for a loan rehab. If not, government says they could order non-federal employers, meaning your boss, to withhold part of your paycheck to help pay that delinquent debt. This announcement comes as part of a larger plan for the Trump White House to dismantle the education department.
Okay, so Danielle, this is grotesque. It's cruel. But when you consider it in the context of the fact that the Biden-Harris administration wanted to forgive student loans, it is almost impossible to bear, quite frankly.
That and the fact that Republicans in Congress, as well as the Supreme Court, decided that they wanted people who only want to achieve higher education to remain indebted, right? Because as Brian's point that he made, you're not going after the people that grift off of the poor. You're not going after those that have stolen millions and billions of dollars. No, you're going after those that are trying to get a higher education because they were fed the lie that in order to access the American dream, you needed to go into 6 figures worth of debt in order to get a higher education, which is the biggest fucking Ponzi scheme this country has ever seen. And so when we look at what is happening right now, like when we look at what is happening right now, it is obscene. But the fact is, we knew that this was going to happen. Again, autocracy works when people are, as Brian said, undereducated. I will add to that, sick, right? Because we have a HHS secretary that is going to ensure that all of us have some type of virus or disease moving forward, and then not provide us with the benefit of insurance to pay for our health. But aside from that, here is the thing. Education, intellect is the enemy of autocracy and dictatorship. So, of course, you have got to strike a blow at the heart of those that are trying to achieve better. You have to beat them back into their place to understand who's in power and that you should be lucky to have the low-paying fucking job that you have. Right? Like that's the society that Donald Trump and MAGA is successfully creating. Because when you fire hundreds of thousands of people, when then you criminalize those that are just trying to get ahead by saddling them with an obscene amount of debt, then taking the wages that are just enough to cover rent, to cover a car payment, to cover medicine, to cover food, right? To cover health, to cover child care. Which, by the way, apparently they're up to giving now a $5,000 boon for white babies to be born in this country. I saw that headline because the headline, sure enough, is not about black and brown babies. They don't want none of that.
No way.
Like, here's $5,000 to get pregnant, but after that baby comes out of utero, you are screwed. So, I mean, it's just the idea to create the conditions for suffering. That's what this is. And that's why more people need to get out into the streets. That's why more people need to boycott. That's why more strategy is needed. And I continue to call for a nationwide strike because these pop-offs that we're doing, they matter absolutely, but we need to coalesce around a much bigger idea, which is to disrupt the oligarch altogether. And that does not happen one weekend, 1 month at a time. It happens when we shut this shit down. because that's what they're trying to do to the United States of America, to our democracy, to what the founding fathers said that we had the ability to pursue, right? Our happiness, our health, our well-being is an affront to what Donald Trump's vision is of America and what he is creating every day.
Yeah, and I think it's worth remembering that there's a personal aspect to all of this. The only reason Donald was able to succeed in his life is because people far more worthy, far more intelligent, kinder, or all the good stuff were crushed to make room for him, and he knows it. And that it's part of the revenge, the vengeance, the drive to go after anything good, because he knows that there's nothing good about him. And you don't want people smarter than you, more successful than you, more creative than you, none of it. And because he's none of those things anyway. So it basically means he doesn't want anybody around him except people lying to him about how wonderful he is. And Adam, just quickly on this is because we try to remind people that this is all of a piece. One, it's cruel. Doing this is just cruel because the reason for the moratorium in the first place was because of the economic hardship created by COVID. Mm-hmm. And finally, towards the end of the Biden administration, even though, yes, eggs were expensive, inflation was higher than people wanted to be, prices across the board were higher. However, and I will continue to quote this Economist article till the day I die, because the Economist is not a bunch of liberal crazy people. The Economist is a conservative publication that specializes in, I know it's shocking, the economy. They call the Biden economy the envy of the world. That is the economy that Donald Trump inherited. In less than 100 days, he has come this close to destroying it. And I'm not saying he's not going to. He very likely will. So to make this move right before this country and the world are going to be plunged into a recession is not just cruel, it's creating massive amounts of confusion. And to Danielle's earlier points, that's intentional.
I think two things here. One, the way that you just described who Donald Trump is and where he comes from is something you should talk about every single time you're doing a show, because you're one of the only people that can say that from an authoritative standpoint. And that will get to him and that will drive him fucking crazy. And to Danielle's point, which we've talked about and Brian mentioned it too, this sort of like national strike that's needed. I didn't really think about this until Danielle just mentioned it again, but maybe to some extent we need some self-inflicted pain in order. We're going to get it. They're coming for you no matter what, all of you, everyone, every one of us. Right. So by grouping together on a specific date or week and actually doing this in a way where we know it's going to hurt. We know we're probably, some people may lose their jobs. Some people may not get some pay, but if we all group and band and do this together, that is what it's going to take. And it better do it now and get out in front of it before they do it for you and you can't recover from it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, again, if we don't take drastic action, what's going to stop this? Right, Brian? We talk about that all the time. We all think about it all the time. And that is why, I think all of us have been saying since, at least since the inauguration, if not before, letting it play out is risky. Obviously we don't have any power in the government. Democrats are out of power. Okay. So there are things they can do around the edges.
We don't have power when we're in power.
Well, that's a conversation for another time.
Ooh, that's a whole show.
Oh my God. That's something we definitely need to be talking about as well. But in the context of this, obviously there's a possibility that the Trump regime continues to overstep, or they're so incompetent that they burn it all down. Okay, but in order for that for it to burn itself out in a way that leaves anything for us to work with, it would have to happen very, very quickly. It's not happening quickly enough, first of all. Secondly, Brian, what if it just keeps going and becomes normalized, like everything else about Donald has become normalized, and his base is like, oh, well, I guess in order to make America great again, I can't have Social Security anymore.
Yeah.
Or, keep your government hands off of my Medicare or whatever. I mean, or they just like swallow hook, line, and sinker the line being sold them and are like, well, as long as Black and brown people don't have rights, I'm okay not having rights, or whatever they're going to be convinced to do. So to Dale's point, the protests are extremely important. They need to get bigger. They need to get more frequent. They need to be everywhere. But I think the main importance of them is to alert other people that they need to be paying attention. And the only way we get out of this is to stop everything.
Yep.
And to your point, it needs to get bigger, and the press needs to report on it. When 4 dead in Ohio,
don't be silly.
And that was when that happened, Kent State massacre. That was a huge national story. These things are happening. I've seen them in LA. I've seen them in DC. I've seen them in Washington, DC. I've seen them in Chicago. I'm sorry. Why? Where are we in the press reporting on it? We're in the press briefing room going, hey, Mr. President, can you shoot more rainbows out of your butt? That's the problem. The problem is that the communication aspect. So you're going to have to go around the fact that we are dysfunctional as a press. And that, of course, is part and parcel part of the problem brought to us by 40 years of, beginning with Ronald Reagan, the centralization and the elimination of an independent free press. As Ben Bagdickian once said, if you want a free press, diverse press, you have to have a diversity of ownership. That's not happening. So there's a huge problem there. But what you're talking about, I love the idea of a national strike. But what you're really talking about is the fact that Donald Trump in 93 days, this is just, we've only been here 3 months. I was on the phone with Mark Zaid the other day, who lost. He's in case people don't know, he's a great FOIA attorney. He also had security clearance and increased his security clearance under the first Donald Trump regime, has sued both Democrats and Republicans and is there for whistleblowers, and got lumped in with other people and had it lost. And he goes, Brian, his clearance, he goes, after 3 years, and I had to stop him. I go, Mark, it's only been 3 months. It's the fact that it can happen so fast is frightening. The last hope is that the Supreme Court, and boy, is that a slim hope, would stand up against him and force his hand. It's going to have to be the rest of the country forcing his hand. And to your point, and to everyone else's point, look, why do you think he's coming down so hard on immigration? They came out today and said there's 0 new immigrants. At the same time, you are killing educational opportunities. So what you want is a dumb working force that is doing the job and the jobs that incoming immigrants have done before they've stepped up the ladder. What this administration and oligarchs want are steps down the ladder where it's feudalism.
Well, that's why all these AI videos of Elon Musk and Donald Trump and MAGA supporters out in the fields and factories are so honest.
Yes, and that's true. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, it's going to take losing, some of the self-inflicted pain, losing your Medicaid, losing your Medicare, losing your Social Security. People do want that. Even MAGA people that I've spoken to say, look, I want to be able to retire in peace. Well, you're not. And you have fallen for the BS lie that Trump has sold you, that he's not going to touch Social Security. And by the way, they have also are trying to institute what amounts to a poll tax so that you will suppress voters by making you show what do they want you to show?
Passport.
And your birth certificate.
How much does that cost? What,
Birth certificates that don't match up with your married name. I mean, there's like
Yes, and they
140
want to
million
limit all
Americans
of
without
that
a passport.
and charge
Also,
you
by the way,
for it.
like 30% of Americans have a passport.
Yeah. So
Yes.
you are limiting the voting to those people who would most likely support the GOP. The GOP figured out a long time ago, since they are a minority party, a majority of people are not members of the GOP. The only way they can hold on to power is to limit your ability to be involved in the system. And that is why you have to get out now. Now, I take some hope out of the fact that we have had some pretty ugly, awful presidents in the past, and we've survived it. But nothing in history, and I'm a student of history. That was one of my majors in college. I am a student of American history, and it has never been this bad. You have never had a PEP secretary pushing the criminal propaganda in that press briefing room, aided and abetted by members of the far-right media sitting in toboggan hats like they did today in the briefing room, spouting nonsense about due process of law. This is the inflection point. This is the point where you have to say something, or you will never be able to say it again in your lifetime. Get off your fat butt and get involved. Sorry.
And listen, it's all true. And the longer to repeat, the longer this goes on, the more incursions they're going to make into our freedoms and rights. And no, I don't care if you believe in COVID. First of all, COVID-19 doesn't care if you believe in it either.
Yeah.
Just like climate change. It's not a belief system. It's science. But even if you're not worried about COVID-19, you should be very worried that the official COVID-19 information website, covid.gov, is now a page promoting the lab leak theory as the origin of the pandemic. I mean, seriously, nobody should want its government to be suppressing vitally important medical information, even if it's not of interest to you, just like none of us should want our public schools banning books about anything, even if we don't particularly want to expose our children to the horrors of open-mindedness and diversity.
Hey, if you don't like it, you don't have to turn it on. You don't have to read it. You just can't limit it for the rest of us to be involved.
But that's kind of my point. Like, it is a slippery slope, because there's no guarantee that the next thing to go is something that's important to you. Like, I don't know, could be Christianity, except they find that far too useful a tool to use against our freedoms. So another beginning of a fun week here in America. It is just stunning that it's been 93 days. It does feel like it's been years. I mean, it has been years, though, right? I mean,
I thought it was 100 days 3 weeks ago. So we're almost there.
Yeah,
Not
but
the end of this month. We got a week left for the first 100 days.
and who knows? Because it sort of feels like it's all speeding up exponentially, not arithmetically. Anyway, we're gonna wrap. I have some questions, comments that I'd just like to get to quickly. His Divine Scadu, thank you as always. Glad to have you here. A validation fee. Remind me not to overindulge in rage post all weekend. LMFAO. Okay, so for those of you who aren't aware, during my Mary Trump Live, which is Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, people started paying fees, which are fictional. We do not charge fees at Mary Trump Media. People have been paying late fees. They've been paying cat treat fees, turtle fees, and now we have a validation fee. So we appreciate it. But just so you know, it's nothing. We have not instituted fees because we don't believe in doing that. I'm not that kind of Trump. I was exactly. Thank you, Adam.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
To a theater near you.
Donna, thank you so very much. Comment: I am burying my retirement money in jars in my backyard fee. Well, if you're burying your money in your backyard, don't pay a fee. Come on.
McMullen is
Put it
not
in the
her real last name for those looking her up right now.
Witchy Poop Broken Broom, thank you so very much. Comment, I want to know about Trump's GoFundMe's. I don't know what
I
the
asked
plural
about
of that
that.
is. And who's getting that money? He's still raising, no way. For the Butler
Yeah.
shooting?
Yeah.
Something smells fishy. So much about that smells fishy. I cannot speak about it publicly, but that it's all a scam. It's all a scam.
Yes.
Okay. All of it. So that should always be your starting point with these people. A dumpster driving dragon. It's good diving. Did dragons drive? I don't think they do. A dumpster diving dragon. Thank you so very much. It's good to see you. Blessings to you and yours, Mary. Hippie hair tax. That's new. Cool. I like it.
Well, I wish I had the hair to tax.
Inlays. Even MAGA won't support Social Security Administration being eliminated. Social Security, SSI, and SSDI, different story. But even then, 30% of MAGA are in these programs of SSI and SSDI as their only income, so they will bail on Donald. I don't know. Danielle, I want to ask you about that. Do you think they will bail the base ever?
No.
Never.
I mean, these are, it's 30% of the population that is, firmly with Donald Trump. And, like he said many, many moons ago, I could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and I would see my poll numbers go up. It doesn't matter. What's amazing to me is that we had how many indictments, how many court cases, how much evidence. They believe none of it. But they believe that Donald Trump told them that 2 plane loads of people that were sent to an El Salvador torture prison without any evidence, without anything other than what Donald Trump said, without due process, were quote unquote gang members and human traffickers. So that's what we're dealing with. You could roll up a U-Haul truck of evidence for them to sift through themselves about Donald Trump's misgivings, and they will say that everything in front of them is fake. But he says, whatever he says goes. And that's, so I'm like, please stop trying to appeal to these people who have, they have sworn their allegiance.
Yep.
And that sadly are who's in charge of our government now. And
Ken
all of
Jones and David Koresh all rolled into one.
And they will, as many of them have said openly, they will die for him.
Yeah.
They will.
They absolutely
give them the Kool-Aid and get it over with.
And they have.
And Ashley Babbitt did.
Ashley Babbitt did. Oh man. Okay, so let's move on from that very uplifting moment. Okay.
Well, she's
Kelly,
not on the show today.
No. Kelly, thank you so very much. Red State fee, I feel like we should be paying you. But thank you. K Killer Elite 360. Thank you very much for that comment. One of the only news sources I watch now. Keep up the good work. Wow, thank you. That means a lot, and we love it. And do not forget to check out all of the other Nerd Avengers other projects they've got going on, because trust me, they're essential. Possum of Antica, thank you very much. Comment, this is the accept the darn fees, you deserve them fee. Just kidding. Why be kidding about that? I love that. Thank you.
The penguin fee.
Yeah, we need a penguin fee. We actually have a legitimate fee. It's a kitten treat fee because Mary Trump Media wants to have a phalanx of kittens that we are raising to protect democracy. Or just because I also love kittens. So there's that reason too. Lynn, thank you so very much. Comment, their privilege and racism matter more to his voters than money. Oh yeah. Oh, that is that, and that's been happening for centuries. So we can't pretend that Donald came up with that. That has been the way since white people got here. So, that is that's long standing. And that was all intentional. Anyway, so let's couple of other thank you again.
Mary,
Kelly
can I just say
Montana.
the comments are so fun to read? Like, Anyways, we have like the best people in the comments.
We have the best commenters, and
Just
unfortunately,
so many good ideas.
I can't keep track of the comments, so which makes me sad. So I try to read them when I can after.
They're so fun.
Yeah, they're awesome. Best commenters ever. So again, super sticker Kelly Montana, thank you so much for that. And SC, thank you very much.
Oh my.
Another super sticker, Gina.
What?
And another super sticker, Kit Kat. Hang on, Brian. Hang on. I'm almost done. Okay. And another super sticker, Inlays. Thanks, guys, so much. Brian seems to have something he needs to say.
I don't want to know. It's like I want to know, but I don't want to know.
I just got an email from the White House saying, on Earth Day, we finally have a president who follows science. And I thought it was comedy. I thought it was something from The Onion, and it's actually from the White House. What a raging pile of shit. Sorry.
That was good. That's good. That was funny.
How many times can irony die? I don't know.
That was good.
I think that's a great note to end on because that helped. All right, guys. First of all, everybody watching on YouTube, everybody live streaming from Twitter and from my Substack, The Good in Us, thank you. And of course, everybody listening to the podcast form of this. Again, to all of our super stickers and everybody giving us gifts. I promise you, it's all in good hands and we're growing, and we couldn't do it without you. There are other ways to support us, though. You could just subscribe to the channel. We're closing in on 400,000 subscribers. Like, share our videos. That helps a lot. Comment on them. Don't forget, we have recorded videos dropping every day as well. So check those out. To our amazing moderators who do a very difficult work. I promise you, it is not easy to be a moderator sometimes. And of course, to my amazing team for like dealing with all of this with such grace and equanimity, because I promise you, it is not easy. It is not easy to do. Also, just a reminder, again, Mary Trump Live, 6 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. The Nerds, Tuesdays at 3 every week. And again, check out everybody else's work. All of Danielle, Adam, Brian, they all have Substacks that you need to be checking out. Danielle's YouTube channel, Brian's show, Just Ask the Question. I mean, it's all worth reading and listening to, and they all need to be supported to any extent you can support them. So again, Danielle Moody, Brian Karam, Adam Parker Mako, thanks guys for being here. It's wonderful as always to hang with you. I will see the rest of you tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern live. And in the meantime, everybody, please stay safe and be kind.